I'm just back from South Africa, but I had the most incredible trip. It was really a lifelong pilgrimage for me to go. Went to the waiting room where Gandhi sat on the floor for 10 hours trying to decide what to do. And he wrote in his autobiography that when he stood up, his act of nonviolence began that day and began to change the world. So we went to that spot and prayed there. It was so powerful. And then we went to Durban to his ashram, and then to Port Elizabeth, where Steve Biko lived and worked. Remember him from the movie Cry Freedom? He was really important for me as a kid, because he was brutally killed when he was 30. But to me, he may be the greatest of them all, greater than Mandela, because he had a vision, which he called black consciousness, which is basically, we all, black and white, have to reclaim our humanity. That's powerful teaching. The end of our pilgrimage was a day with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Wow. The first thing he said to me was, we can never give up the struggle for justice and peace. Right. Yeah. He's 82. His health is really bad. And he was leaving for Iran the next day. I was mighty impressed. That's no joke to travel to Iran. How do you do it? Because he's been this heroic figure for the whole world. And he leaned forward and looked me in the eye and he says, I cry a lot. It was so touching, and I thought, so holy. We have a God who weeps, he said, because nobody gets it that we're sisters and brothers of one another. So I have wept every single day of my whole life. And I laugh, he said. So I weep, and I laugh, and I carry on the work for justice and peace. My journey began when I was on a 3-month pilgrimage and by myself hitchhiking through Israel, just as Israel invaded Lebanon. And I was camping out at the Sea of Galilee, visiting the Chapel of the Beatitudes, praying over the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount for the first time in my life. Blessed are the peacemakers, love your enemies. And we saw these jets swoop down over the Sea of Galilee and drop bombs a few miles away at the border of Lebanon. It changed my life. And to see warfare at the place where Jesus gave us the greatest instructions of peace and love and nonviolence ever. And so I decided I would try to live out the teachings and to teach the teachings. And that led me to sit at the feet of Daniel and Philip Berrigan, my friends and teachers, you know, the Berrigans. And Dan is now 92 years old now and very frail, but he's like Buddha. And if you're sitting at the feet of the Berrigans, it's like a matter of time before you have to go and get arrested at the Pentagon. It's just like a requirement to be a friend. No. Anyway, as Linda said, now I've got a long prison record. I've been arrested like 80 times, like some of you troublemakers here in Iowa. And I can't vote anymore. I'm an ex-con. I can't travel to a lot of countries. I'm under serious surveillance, and I have a serious problem with recidivism. But it's very exciting. I lived and worked in El Salvador in '85, under the tutelage of the Jesuits who were later assassinated. That was a life-changing experience with me. Walkington in North Carolina under the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, the largest Air Force base in the country, with Philip Berrigan, who walked up to one of the F-15E nuclear fighter bombers and hammered on the side of it once. Yeah. As I said to the judge later, Your Honor, I'm just doing what it says in the Bible. It says someday people are going to come along and beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more. Is there a problem? That didn't go over well. Spent 9 months in a prison cell with Phil Berrigan. It was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Worked at the Fellowship of Reconciliation, led a delegation of Nobel laureates to Iraq. It's also a life-changing experience. Being very involved in September 11th as a coordinator for the Red Cross, coordinating 600 chaplains ministering to 50,000 direct relatives while helping out with the anti-war demonstrations against the U.S. bombing of Afghanistan in Times Square and Union Square, getting kicked out of New York by church officials and moving to New Mexico, which is the poorest state in the country. Did you know that? #1 in everything, you know, worst education, number one in child hunger, number one in drunk driving, domestic violence, suicide, military recruitment, number one in military spending, and number one in nuclear weapons. We think there are 3,000 nuclear weapons at the Albuquerque airport. Yeah, more than any other place on the planet, maybe except for this small city in the very north of Russia. And in the center of New Mexico, on this beautiful mountaintop, is this birthplace of the atomic bomb, Los Alamos. These the national laboratories, which President Obama is trying to rebuild, totally upgrade. He's trying to make a state-of-the-art plutonium bomb factory, the likes of which the world has never seen. Actually, I don't think George W. Bush could even imagine what Obama's doing. He's done so much for nuclear weapons. Last year I went to Afghanistan. What an experience. And just to get there was something. There in Kabul, one of the greatest peace groups on the planet. 25 young people who've lost each a relative to the US drones. Decided, well, we're going to be killed anyway. Let's try to become Gandhi and Dr. King ourselves. They formed the Afghan Peace Volunteers. And they were in this village way out. Their house was burned down by the government, so they came to Kabul. And they wrote to me and some Nobel laureates and others, Shane Claiborne and other friends. We all flew in to try to support them. And I've never been with such wonderful people, so struggling and committed with nonviolence. How can we, the most bombed, the most targeted people on earth, become like Gandhi? And we're Muslim. They were memorizing Dr. King's speeches in Farsi. So beautiful, and really struggling with nonviolence. And I sat with them for a week listening to their stories of the US drone attacks and then how it killed all their loved ones. And heard that this doesn't work. War doesn't work, and war can't stop terrorism because war is terrorism. We'd all join the Taliban if we lived over there. But it's such a myth and such a lie, everything we've been taught. These kids were telling me, the drones fly way high up and then drop their bombs, and they're saying that some guy, some kid at Creech Air Force Base, or maybe soon in Des Moines, is targeting, where that drone and bomb is going to be attacked from a camera on the plane at 25, 30,000 feet. He goes, we don't know who's the Taliban, but your guy in Nevada who's 18 years old knows. And we blow up wedding parties and so forth and so on. But the good news was their commitment. And that's what I want to share with you, and urge you to reflect on. What are we doing for peace? How deep can we go into the life of nonviolence? What are we giving our lives for? That's what I learned from the Afghan Peace Volunteers. These are good questions. And what Tutu was telling me as well. I invite you, as I'm talking, to reflect on your life. How are you moving out of the culture of violence and war and non-cooperating with violence? And from this day forward, becoming a peacemaker, more and more, a real person of peace and nonviolence, and doing what you can with the short time left we have on earth. And Iowa is such an important place for this country. You can really be a beacon of light and hope if you continue to organize. So many of you doing so many good things. Jonathan Sheldon says we now live in a world of total violence, permanent war, 25 wars happening tonight, with our country involved and everyone selling weapons to all sides. But there's 4 billion people in total poverty, and the UN says 1 billion people are hungry, or malnourished, or actively starving. That's an incredible statistic to me that's being totally ignored. And from this structured, institutionalized world of violence comes all this other violence you're trying to resist, from racism, sexism, torture, prisons, on and on. But I look out the window where I live in New Mexico and see Los Alamos, and I'm reminded how we, on August 6, 1945, vaporized 120,000 people at Hiroshima, and did again 3 days later. And there's some 15 to 20,000 nuclear weapons with no movement for disarmament on the planet right now. In some ways, we're worse than ever. And of course, because of what we've done with the fossil fuels and the destruction of the environment, heading toward catastrophic climate change. That doesn't actually do it at all. The cataclysm that is coming. The night before he was killed, Martin Luther King said, The choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. It's nonviolence or non-existence. Unless we all become nonviolent, we're doomed to our self-destructive violence. And I think that's the truth we're seeing right now. I mean, violence is the air we breathe now. It's normal, and it's legal, and it's legitimate, and it's spiritualized, so that the churches are just going right along quietly with the culture of violence. And love also, I think, has just been so abused. The word, the language of peace is what I'm trying to get at. But Gandhi and Dr. King used this word. I invite you to reflect on it, whether we call it active, creative, loving nonviolence. What does it mean for you? How can we together become people of active, creative, loving nonviolence? Every human being on the planet is your very sister and brother. That's the key to the spiritual life. That was the point of all organized religion. We're all one. Everyone is already united in a reconciled humanity. It's so beautiful. We're sisters and brothers with 7.2 billion people. And the deeper you go into the spiritual truth of reality, of our common unity, and you then widen it toward all creatures and all of creation, so beautiful. You can never hurt anybody, much less kill someone, much less be silent when there's 25 wars happening and 15,000 nuclear weapons and 1 billion people starving and catastrophic climate change bearing down upon us. There's nothing passive about this. This is a life of active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity, persistently reconciling with every human being, allowing the God of peace to disarm our hearts of the roots of violence and war in each one of us, so that we can offer the real gift of peace to the planet. Practicing from this day on unconditional, non-retaliatory, sacrificial, all-encompassing, universal love for every human being on the planet. Isn't that great? Now there's this one catch. There is no cause, however noble, no matter what anyone ever says to us for the rest of our lives, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human life. No, we just got to kill Hitler. No, we'll kill Saddam. No, we've got to kill Osama. And then I'll stop killing. I'm just going to have that one more drink, and then I promise I'll give up drinking. It's the same thing. It's this addiction. Nonviolence is a boundary line in our behavior. You don't cross that line of hurting or killing another human being, much less 100 million victims of war in the last century. And once we set up that boundary line, then we're free not to kill or hurt. And we can really begin to practice universal love, universal peace, universal compassion. And Gandhi says we can organize and mobilize this methodology of love and peace to change the world, because it's the way of God. That nonviolence requires 3 simultaneous attitudes or attributes at the same time. First, you've got to be really nonviolent to yourself. While you're doing that, the second, you have to practice meticulous interpersonal nonviolence to every human being on the planet and all creatures and all of creation. While you're doing that, third, at the same time, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots movement of nonviolence. Everybody is doing 1 or 2 of those, but very few do all 3. That's what Martin Luther King was able to do, and Gandhi and our friends and heroes. Like, we might be really peaceful people and really nice in our families, but not at all involved in the world of war and suffering. That's not nonviolence, to my mind, and from my study of the gospel and from Gandhi and King. Or we might be really great activists. We're involved, and we're mean, and angry, and we're all for peace. That doesn't work either, because we're really involved in the movement, but inside we're just raging, angry, violent people, and we're violent to the people around us. And we're all dealing with all of that. How can we have all? I love what Thich Nhat Hanh says. Just look deeply within. What's going on? Where are the roots of the culture of war in you? What happened to you? And how can we become more peaceful? What we want to do is cultivate interior peace, interior nonviolence. That means, if you will, non-cooperating with our own inner violence, not beating ourselves up after something we did, and then continue to put ourselves down. I think the only way forward is to really conscientiously do what the saints and great peacemakers did, which is take serious quiet time every day in meditation, prayer, solitude, silence, however you call it, with your God, with the Creator, with peace, with the God of peace. If you're a Christian, with Jesus, however it works for you. And let that stuff bubble up and look at what's going on and keep letting it go. Give God all your wounds, your anger, your hurts, your brokenness, your resentments, your bitterness, your violence, the roots of war, whatever is not of God within you. And let the God of peace give you the gift of peace. This is a good thing. This is nice. You know, we're talking about growing. Gandhi said, nonviolence is such a powerful statement. Nonviolence is the highest form of conscious living. This is what Thich Nhat Hanh talks about in terms of mindfulness. To be really centered. To be really trying to live and breathe in peace every day. And I'm adding being conscious of the political consequences and implications of your peacemaking. We're talking about a new kind of spirituality, a dangerous mysticism that is a threat to the sack base and to the drone war and to the Pentagon and the empire. That's what holiness and peacemaking is about.